What's your story? Whether you're a client or an independent financial advisor, we know you face many important decisions that can affect your and your clients' long-term financial success. Welcome to the WIN Podcast, What's Important Now with Corey Heimensen, accredited investment fiduciary and president of Heimensen Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, Corey helps you identify your goals and objectives through financial education and comprehensive planning, while inspiring you to make better behavioral decisions in your personal finance. With a twist on pop culture and current events, join us as we explore growth and protection strategies for individuals, advisors, and their businesses. Come and discover what's important to you now.
Hello and welcome to the WIN Podcast with Corey Heimensen. Corey, what's going on today?
Mr. Eric, good to see you. Yeah. New day, new recording. I'm fired up.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back with you. You always throw me curveballs. You always have something that's just a little different, and I love it. It's not the same old podcast. So, what are we talking about today?
As we're about to roll into summer, that also rolls us into professional basketball. The NBA finals are coming up here in the next few weeks, and while it's best of 7, it seems like the TV networks are able to stretch that into about 20 days.
Yeah, go figure. Yeah.
So today I thought, we'll have a little fun. We'll talk a little basketball. We'll tie it into the world of finance, and who knows where it goes.
Not that you don't already carry the conversation for the most part, but I'm not the biggest basketball fan. I've just never. So I'm from Seattle. We've talked about that before. And, growing up, we had the Seattle Supersonics, which just never was a really big draw. And therefore they're not there anymore. I think they're Oklahoma something.
Yeah. There you go.
Oklahoma something.
So in the risk of alienating fan bases in the country, I'm going to say maybe the Supersonics failed, so to speak, because they wore green and yellow. So there you go, Packers fans. Ooh, throwing the gauntlet down.
Good Lord, that hurt. I'm not even a Green Bay fan, and that hurt.
I don't even know where that came from. I really don't mind the Packers either, but it just seemed like where we needed to go today.
Well, I just think it's factual, right? Green and yellow, it's got to be a bad thing. Anyway, all right, so that was a football curve. Let's get back to basketball. So how is this going to work? How are you going to compare these? I'm very, very interested now.
Yeah, so the title of the podcast today is Financial Fouls. And we're going to tie that in by exploring some topics related to finance and the National Basketball Association. And interestingly enough, or a lot of the listeners probably know the drill here, is that we can essentially tie finance and investing and planning to essentially any topic known to man, woman, or child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's parallels everywhere.
So that's where we're going to go. We'll hopefully learn some things, but tie it all full circle and have some fun.
All right, sounds good. Let's do this.
Okay. So I'm going to start out here first, and I think this is a common thought amongst a lot of fans, is that professional athletes make too much money.
Yeah. Again, somebody's always drawn a parallel to professional athletes and teachers, right? Who's more important and who should be making, the real money. And nobody's ever going to convince me that the athletes should be making as much as they are, with the teachers making as little as they do. So there's that parallel. So I agree with everybody else who says they probably get paid a little bit too much.
Yeah. So just to put this in perspective, a lot of listeners maybe don't know the type of numbers that we're talking about here. So, some of my information is a little bit dated here, but if we look at the 21-22 season, the minimum salary for any player in the league was $925,000 plus.
That's a
plus
minimum?
That's the minimum. Average. Now there's 15 players on the roster sitting on the bench. And, in theory, most teams probably play 7 or 8 of those guys. So, there's a lot of guys sitting around collecting checks. But anyway, average salary during that season, $7.7 million.
Jeez.
I know it's kind of mind blowing. And all the professional sports have some crazy numbers. So we're just focusing on basketball, but highest paid player that season was Steph Curry from Golden State. He made $43.6 million.
Wonder what that breaks down to per basket.
Yeah, it'd be a lot. A lot.
Right? Hey, any of you data junkies out there that are listening, if you break that down for us, please, because, math, email Corey. Tell him.
Yeah.
Let's update us, because I'm really curious. How many baskets did he make in the 21-22 season, and how much was each one worth?
Oh man, and so this isn't even talking about endorsement deals, image and likeness type stuff, or selling jerseys or any of that stuff. So I mean, we're just talking dollars to play sports.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to take the other side of the path. Like when you say, man, they're overpaid, they bring value. You know what I mean? They bring value to the owner, to the franchise. It's an entertainment field. I mean, heck, we could look at professional wrestling too. I mean, that's called a professional sport, and it's based on entertainment and maybe scripted outcomes. But at the end of the day, and we've talked about this before in our line of work or expertise, and it's cost versus value, right? Mm-hmm. And so I like to think about this as people's peak earning years. So whether you're a teacher or a professional basketball player, or, construction, whatever it is, there's likely a window of your lifetime, which would be considered your window of time where you have your maximum earning potential. And I think it's just the American way to take advantage of that. Yeah. And so, I believe in capitalism. I believe in people making money. So, I don't blame these players. Maybe the system is flawed, but I don't think you can blame a person for making money.
Yeah, no, you can't. I just think it's, and I don't want to demonize the owners. I don't want to demonize anybody really, but when the average person, the average human being, can't afford a ticket to go watch the game, that bothers me, I think.
No, that's fair. That's very fair. And some of that stuff's only going to get worse. And even with content, back in the day, you could watch a lot of free TV. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, maybe not a lot of free TV. You had 3 channels and you had to click a box and stand by the TV. But I mean, everything is turned to streaming. And so now whether it's NBA, if it's the NFL Sunday Ticket, or, or movies and Netflix, I mean, basically you pay to play, so to speak, or you pay for content.
Yeah, 100%. You're right.
So anyway, get off the rails a little bit there. So beyond the earning, then I want to think about, how do these athletes, what do they do with their money? Do they plan? Do they get dressed like you and I every day, or do they use planners just like you and I every day? And here's the spoiler. The answer is yes. We can look at the highest paid athletes and what do they invest in? They might invest in real estate. They might invest in stocks and bonds. They might invest in businesses, private businesses. They might donate. I mean, just because their numbers are a lot bigger doesn't necessarily mean they do things differently than the average person should.
Yeah.
And we come back to, and I hate to sound boring, being diversified, using trusted professionals, blah, blah, blah. That's what it's really about. And so the next thing is, do they all get it right? No. Neither does the average Joe or Jane on the street. Life throws curves, and that's why we have this podcast. It's called The Win. What's important now? How do I address today, regardless of what my situation is, whether it's good, bad, dire, you know what I mean? And let's put together a plan that makes a lot of sense. Now, the problem with this is that people are not disciplined, I'll say. So now I'm going down a earth-shattering development. And so it doesn't matter if you're LeBron James or Steph Curry, these really, really high-end, famous celebrity athletes, making lots and lots of money. Mm-hmm. Or if you're a factory worker or a car salesman or whatever. You have to be disciplined in your approach to spending.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure a lot of people have seen these stories too about these athletes that make lots and lots of money and then they're broke. And you could say the same for actors and actresses and things like that. And so it doesn't matter the league or the industry. It might be people that never learned the right lessons growing up or didn't have the role models or the parents to point them on the right path. And you get disastrous outcomes when you just I was going to say spend like a drunken sailor, but that's probably not an appropriate thing to say.
Well, drunken sailors usually don't have that much money.
They have a limited window of spending, and
yeah. If you're talking percentages, you're probably spot on, right? I mean, that's all there is to it. You know, they're blowing most of their paycheck.
Yeah, you know, and so you can compare, and in a world of Instagram and these things, some of these athletes are showing their fancy cars and their jewelry. And then I read stories about, this is another NBA player, Kawhi Leonard, plays for the Clippers, and he makes over $40 million a year. And he's been seen driving around town in his 1997 Chevy Tahoe.
There you go.
You know, lives in a modest home. He's just content. You know, he's not a guy that's going to make headlines for punching somebody during a game. He's just, you know, he knows his role, and he's content and happy with, it appears, with life. That not everybody needs the fancy stuff. Heck, I'm a boring guy. I bring my lunch from work every day, or from home every day. You know what I mean? I'm not even leaving the place to go spend $10 at lunch. And, you know, could I? Yeah, I could, but yeah, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just saying.
No, I mean, we all have those decisions to make, right? I mean, again, we've said it on the podcast before, and people make the correlation Starbucks, right? If you're gonna get coffee, you know, they do make coffee makers for your house. I mean, that's been around for like 50 years. Or you can spend $17 on a cup of coffee at Starbucks or wherever, right? But those are choices. Either you plan your time and you plan what you're going to do. I mean, you have to shop, you have to buy the beans or ground beans, and you have to have the coffee maker. You have to get up a few minutes early, maybe. But if you don't, and you're just on your way and you're never planning ahead, then you're going to swing by and pick up an extremely expensive coffee.
It's totally habit forming too.
Yeah.
Not just the caffeine aspect. I'm just saying habit forming of, this is what I do. This is where I go. This is what I buy. And, you know, and it's tough to break habits. You know, I've read some of those books too, where I don't know, what does it take? 21 days to break a habit or to create a new habit or something like that. I might be way off target on that. Yeah. Maybe that's an exercise routine. You got to do it 23 weeks in a row or something. Then maybe the fourth week's easier. I don't know. But
well, you know, it's interesting because I've always told you this. I love the name of the podcast, What's Important Now. And I did watch a documentary probably years ago by now about Shaq, right? And he bought his parents cars with his first $1 million, and he bought them luxury cars. And I mean, he didn't, I don't think in his own words, I don't think he felt like he owed them, but at the same time, he owed them, right? They were so supportive, you know, helped make his dream come true. And would somebody say, that's a terrible use of your first $1 million, you know, or, you know, it wasn't, he didn't spend the full $1 million, but out of his first $1 million, he bought these fancy cars. Somebody would probably poo-poo the idea and say, nah, you probably shouldn't do that. You should invest. You should do this, whatever. But what was important now for him was doing that for his parents, right? Knowing that he had more paychecks coming in.
Yep.
You know, could he have gotten injured? Sure. I mean, you know, there's always that possibility, but at the same time, he did have a contract. So it wasn't like it was just on a complete whim and no idea what's going to happen. But people find those things very important to be able to do that, to spend maybe some money or time with their family while they can. And other people may say, that's just not a good use of your money. You should invest that for the future, because in the future you'll have A, B, and C. Well, in the future, I might not have my parents. Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
It is so funny. You know, mentally, we must be on the same wavelength, because I didn't even tell you that I had a Shaquille O'Neal story that I was going to use today.
Oh,
and now you brought up his name.
Okay. Did I tell the wrong story? Did I tell your story?
Luckily, my story's different.
Okay.
Not that this is a contest, but anyway.
Right.
So I wanted to give an example of a player that had, you know, more comments or thoughts kind of down the family tree. So this is sort of related to money and not, but so anyway, his quote that jumped out at me, I wanted to use today, is he said basically, and I'm editing a few of the words here just because, but basically it was, I don't give a rip what you are, because if it's done the right way, I believe in nepotism. And so his point here is, and I'll define nepotism because I think that's a word that people think, ooh, that sounds like a really negative word. So nepotism is basically the act of, I suppose you'd say, granting privilege or advantage to your family members or to relatives, or maybe it's a close friend, so, and I know for a fact, there's a successful law firm not far from where I'm at, 100 lawyers in there, and they have a very strict policy on this, that, there's none of this business. There's no nepotism. There's, if you're a lawyer here, your kid's not going to apply here. It's not going to happen. They're just very strict. But what O'Neill is saying here is, if it's done the right way, he believes that nepotism, or giving an advantage essentially to family, makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense if you believe in generational wealth.
Absolutely.
Meaning, let's maybe dad or grandpa, grandma, somebody in the family tree maybe really worked hard and they killed it. They had a great idea and they piled up wealth and cash flow and all that. And a lot of times by about the third generation, family businesses are in the tank.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like his point here. And I'm not saying my thoughts here or comments or his have to match everybody that's listening. Everybody has their own deal. By all means, use your own opinions. But point being, why wouldn't you use the tools in the toolbox to better those that are close to you? And if you disagree, Eric, I'm happy to take that or see what you have to say. You know what I mean?
I don't. I agree 100%. I mean, it's, again, doing it well. And just as an example, which you've talked about on the podcast before, is that you don't, when your son turns 18, you don't give him $1 million because he's your son. It's just not a good idea. It's not done well, right? Me at 18, I'll be dead in a week, right? I'm going to get the fastest car possible. I'm going to be as stupid as I possibly could. And I'm going to, hit a cow in the middle of some sort of road, guaranteed, at like 150 miles an hour. But that was me. And I would say most teenage boys that I know. But $1 million to your son is great if it's structured well, if it's done well, if it's executed well, it's done in a way that's going to protect them from themselves. And maybe you wait till they're a little older, or maybe it comes to them a little bit of a time to help with college or help with living expenses or whatever. But just not a good idea to give them a pile of money.
Yeah, and I mean, success in life is about opportunity.
Yes.
So if you have a younger person, arguably whether they're related to you or not, don't they deserve the opportunity to succeed or to build or better themselves?
Yeah.
For sure they do. And so if it just happens to happen inside the family tree, I don't think that's a horribly bad thing. Let's say I'm a pirate in the Caribbean.
I've seen that movie.
And I'm really not a swimmer, but anyway, that's a whole side number. If I'm a pirate in the Caribbean, that's all I know is how to be a pirate. And my kids watch me being a pirate. They might be a pretty good pirate someday, maybe better than the kid that's on the land. It's a weird tangent of an example, but the point being, I think if somebody in the family tree is successful at something, those other people are looking up to that person. They're watching those traits and those details, and that it takes hard work or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's just cool to me that you brought up Shaq, and this is something we could talk about because it makes a lot of sense. And so let's look at the downside of nepotism. We'll go back to LeBron James. He's got a son, and I think he's in high school yet, or early college. He's going to get drafted in the NBA just because of his name. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of thing happens especially in baseball all the time. I think it was in one of the Freakonomics books, there was statistics that basically if your dad was a professional baseball player, your odds of getting into the league were much higher than just an average other person that didn't have any lineage, down the path. So I guess maybe that's the opportunity card that comes up again. You got to put yourself in a good position for success.
Well, imagine what they're going through, right? Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. is my example because I'm from Seattle.
Yeah, sure.
Ken Griffey Jr. grew up around major baseball players. Do we not think that he got all sorts of tips and they played with him and they helped him, and not just his dad, all the other players that his dad was teammates with, right? I mean, that's the advantage, right? You get all this coaching and all this training and all this thing, and you're watching and watching and watching and learning. boy, you got 3 legs up, not just 1 leg up.
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, and it could be as simple as, oh, mom and dad balance their checkbook every month. Maybe I should balance mine.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the exact same story. It can just be pushed to different categories, and whether that's habits of spending or habits of not having bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that you're so spot on. In the flip side, I'm jumping around here a little, but another one of my examples was a basketball player named Antoine Walker, and so this goes back a while. He was probably not a household name, but anyway, the reason we tell his story is that he was a disaster essentially. He made over $110 million in his career and had to file bankruptcy.
Jeez.
And the reason we highlight him is that he is very vocal now and visible in the public and talking to these athletes in the league and trying to say, hey, learn from my mistakes and don't do this.
Yeah.
But he was famous for having 8 to 10 cars at a time in his fleet, 15 to 20 high-end watches when you only wear one watch at a time, and he said he had 4 houses. You start having 4 houses. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that have a second house, maybe a lake cabin or something like that. But boy, you start carrying 4 houses, and we're not talking small rentals. We're talking, you probably have staff that are mowing the grass and cleaning the place. You got a lot of carrying costs. And if you're in your peak earning years and in an athletic field like that, maybe your window of peak earning is about 5 years.
Yeah.
The sand is going through the hourglass,
Quickly. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's it circles us back to the average Joe or Jane, man, think about the whole journey. Think about what's important to you. If that's the family, if it's enjoying your work, we can go down all those paths.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing is that our kids are always watching us, right? They're always watching us. And grandkids as well. For those that have grandkids, they're watching it. So they're absorbing, they're little sponges. I'll never forget, and I'll pardon the one bad word on this podcast today. But I'll never forget, I was working on my van. I was probably 24, 25. Van wasn't going well. And my son had one of those little battery powered monster trucks, right? And so he was in the front yard with me. And I had it up on little ramps for him to fix his truck while I'm fixing the van. I'm out there doing that thing. And that wrench slipped. I smacked my knuckles. And first thing I was like, shit. And all of a sudden I look over and he's underneath his truck. And I hear this shit. I'm like, oh man. Oh, don't tell your mother.
I'm getting
right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm having a flashback to another, it's actually a movie. Was it Christmas Story? Did you ever see Christmas Story?
And so it's changing the tire.
It's changing a tire and something goes wrong and all the lug nuts go up in the air and he says fudge or some version there.
That's exactly what it was in the version that we got to hear. It was so drawn out. That was so dramatic too. Because all the nuts are flying and the fudge. But his dad's eyes got real big. It's like, that's not what he said.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So funny.
Oh man.
But you're right. People are always watching. So that doesn't matter if it's family. I mean, we're talking family there, but I mean, if you out there are a business owner, let's say, and you have a small business, you got to be on point too of when you're out in public, taking care of business, how the way you carry yourself and things like that. So, I mean, that almost ties into professional sports, I suppose you could say. Sometimes people are considered role models and sometimes they aren't. And that's who I always like, Charles Barkley, who's probably more famous now as being a commentator and telling it like it is. But, I think his quote one time was, I'm not a role model. I am not paid to be a role model, even though kids might be looking up to me. And, I kind of respect him for making the statement, but I maybe don't agree with it. When you're cast in the public eye like that, I think there is a level of expectation that you should. A
certain responsibility,
deliver, responsibility and be smart and stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, if you run a business that has lots of employees, whether it's a basketball league or any other kind of manufacturing facility, you got a lot of personalities, you got a lot of people in there, and you're going to get all walks of life, and you're going to get people that are role models and people that are not.
Well, here's the thing: is that to the listener, I know it's very easy at the end of the podcast to turn the podcast off and say, that was a great podcast, and that's it. And then you wait for the next episode to come out 2 weeks later. Here's the thing: is that I would challenge you, and Corey and I've talked about this. Corey, you've talked about it on the podcast as far as reflecting, doing some self-reflecting. I would love every listener just to take 10 minutes. Really, it's not going to take you much more than 10 minutes, maybe 20 at the most. Get yourself at a quiet place and think about the interactions that you've had with your kids, your grandkids, or the public, like, you were saying with business owners, with your consumers, with your suppliers. Just think about this last year. Is there something that you could have taught somebody better? Is there a message that maybe you didn't want out there, whether it was due to your own frustration, or if your kids are watching you and you and your spouse are not fighting by any means, but maybe they don't agree on all the finances or whatever it is? What example are you giving? And this isn't guilt. This is just, hey, it happens to the best of us. It happens to me all the time. I've got to look back and say, hey, did I do the best I possibly could in this scenario? And just reflect on that and think about this last year. And is there something that you could clean up, if you will? I'm using air quotes on a podcast, but clean up when it comes to the messaging that you're giving those younger folks or the people within your sphere.
Absolutely. And in my mind, I'm thinking of myself, and I'm totally guilty of this, but I'll see, let's call it a random act of kindness by somebody. And I think, I should just wait a few days and then maybe send that person a handwritten card and just say, hey, I saw that and that was really cool. And so I think of those things all the time. You know how many of them I write?
Yeah. I know.
It's like, you get busy, it goes away, and you're like, then the next time you see one of these acts of kindness, you're like, I never wrote that last one. I should do it this time.
Yeah.
30, 40 years from now, you might look back and think, I am damn glad I wrote all those cards. At the time you write them, you might think, that's kind of stupid, or they'll think I'm that weird guy or whatever. But, it never hurts to step out of your box. And, if something's talking to you in the head like that, to do it, by all means, you should follow through and do it.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely.
I have to give my wife credit because she goes in streaks where, like, once a month, she'll just like send flowers to somebody that, generally probably an older person than her, just kind of a sort of a random act of kindness that way. Like, hey, just wanted to brighten your day.
I knew I liked her.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that.
I never buy my wife flowers, just because, again, boy, this is kind of a come to who meeting, I guess, here today.
You feel like you're laying on a couch yet?
Oh man, yeah.
Burying your soul. Well, maybe she likes to buy flowers for other people, but like my wife doesn't like flowers that have been cut. She loves plants, but I'm not going to give her dead ones, right? She doesn't want that.
Right.
So I'm kind of off the hook. I don't know about you.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I mean, is that kind of the old saying too? Or I don't know.
But you can put a reminder in your phone to teach you. That's the thing. And speaking of those cards that you were talking about, that's what I've been relying on more and more because my memory is not that great. It's just, I'm bouncing between things like everybody else is, right? You're a business owner, you're bouncing between clients, you're bouncing between family, you're bouncing between, community responsibilities. Thank God for that phone where I can put a quick note in, or what I usually do is text myself, which is really weird, but I'll text myself something so that the little number's on the screen. And then later on, I'm like, ooh, who texted me? Cause I forgot I texted myself, right? That whole forgetful thing. I'm like, ooh, it was me. And I should do this, right?
Do you ever text yourself back?
Only on Wednesdays, really. Wednesdays are the rough day for me, Corey.
Oh, that is good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, Senor, what else do we need to know for today's podcast? You brought up a lot of great points.
Yeah, I know people probably think we get off in tangents, but like I said at the start, everything can circle back to finance, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. Yeah. Make your plan, enjoy the ride, and let people take it off your plate, so you can have more time to do the things you really, really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I'll probably ask you this again before the end of the podcast, but what's an email that people can reach you at?
It's a great question. I don't know if I've given that lately. Okay, let's go with Corey, Corey, at heimensenwealth.com. And I'll spell that because I know it's kind of a tongue twister, but Heimensen is Heimensen, MENSEN Wealth, WEALTH.com.
All right. So here's the deal, audience. We need 100 people to email that email address specifically. And in the subject line, I want you to put Pirate Corey, because if we get 100, and I'm not settling for anything less than 100 people. If we get 100 people to do that, Corey, I'm promising on your behalf that you're going to dress up as a pirate of the Caribbean, and all 100 of those people will get an autographed picture.
Fair enough. I'm in. I have to be in. I can't opt out and say no when you challenge me in front of thousands of people on here. Jeez.
Exactly. But the deadline is by September that we need these, because, and that's quite a few months away, but by September we need these because, then you can just incorporate it into your Halloween costume, and then it makes more sense than you dressing up as a pirate of the Caribbean in August.
Yes.
All right.
Why wouldn't we? The question of the day, why wouldn't we? Right?
That's right. I mean, any excuse to drink a barrel of rum is a good thing, right? Is that how that works? Is that what pirates drink? Is it a barrel of rum?
R.
It's got to be rum because it starts with an R.
Yeah. Not our first day, is it? Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So if people want to talk to you about other things besides pirates, again, audience, go back and listen to a bunch of these podcasts, because there's just a ton of great information. But if they want to reach out to you and talk about maybe their what's important now moment, you want to use that same email address? You want to use something else? You want to give a phone number? What do you want to do?
Email always works, but hey, let's throw the phone number out there. This is our 800 number. I'll pay for the call. 800-657-4316.
All right, Corey, thank you so much. This is a great podcast today. Loved it.
Right on, my friend.
All right. And our last thank you, of course, goes to you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Win Podcast with Corey Heimensen. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Corey comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at Heimensen Wealth Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the WIN Podcast. What's important now? The show that helps you achieve your financial dreams. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, or get a copy of Stop Doing Dumb Things with Your Money by Corey Heimensen, visit www.heimensenwealth.com or give us a call at 712-472-3867. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc. Heimensen Wealth Advisors and Securities America are separate entities.